Today we're gonna save ourselves $300 by building our own ladder to climb the mast. Hey there sailors, and welcome to another episode of the Low Cost Sailor. Climbing up to the very top of our boat's mast is something we'll find ourselves having to do quite often. Like for instance, I might be climbing the mast up around 5 or 6 times a year to do various different tasks, such as meticulously checking the rigging, the essential gear at the top of the mast, like the wind vane, the radio communication antennas, or even the camera I've strategically got mounted up there to keep a vigilant eye on the boat. There are all sorts of ways to climb to the top of the mast. The usual thing is to simply attach ourselves up to the mainsail halyard with either a harness or a bosun's chair, and then someone at the winch hauls us up just like they're hoisting the mainsail. But there are also techniques that let us climb solo. Most of the techniques that let us climb up are based on climbing techniques, pretty much blockers that let us climb up a rope, and we can hoist ourselves up by the rope, whether someone's pulling us up or we gotta pull ourselves up. They're indeed pretty exhausting tasks. The effort that the person cranking the winch has to exert to hoist our weight, or when it's us having to haul ourselves up using climbing techniques, is certainly significant. It's a pretty tiring and slow task indeed. When it comes to going solo, the technique indeed gets pretty tricky. We absolutely gotta know our climbing stuff inside and out thoroughly. We'll need to hitch ourselves securely to at least 2 halyards for a bit of added safety, and we'll have to use ascenders, either foot or hand ascenders, to help us skillfully shimmy up the rope. The truth is, it's a bit of a struggle and a tricky technique, so our goal is going to be to make our lives easier when it comes to climbing the mast. The best way to climb the mast solo, no doubt, would be if we had some fixed steps installed on our mast. There are a ton of instructional guides out there that you'll see on how to do it with aluminum pieces, and how to go about riveting steps along the mast until you can have some steps that, indeed, we could climb up real easy. But there's a hitch. They need to meticulously drill a considerable number of holes in the mast, which not only looks quite unsightly but also significantly skyrockets the chance of getting our halyards snagged or cut in them. So, another option indeed is to shell out more cash. A good chunk more. Because if whipping up some aluminum steps might run us about $100 in materials, we could opt for stainless steel folding steps that might set us back about $25 a pop, and keep in mind we might need to slap on 20 of these bad boys to reach the top of our mast. So we're kinda in the same boat, since we'd still need to drill a whole bunch of holes in the mast. We never like drilling holes in the mast, it weakens it, and besides, there's still a chance it could jam, even though it looks pretty slick. Our pitch today is to make ourselves a sturdy ladder that we can hoist up, just like when we hoist the mainsail, and that's gonna let us climb up using those very steps. It's going to be meticulously crafted with sling and aluminum steps, as we'll observe later on. The possibilities within these kinds of scales are truly endless. There are commercial ladders that range from $300 to more than $800, and that is for a small mast, not a very tall mast. For instance, there's this really quite delightful one I can hook you up with if you've got the cash. It's by Kinleven Marine. Plus it fits right into the main sail track and it's super safe, but we're talking, it's gonna run you about $800 or $1,000. A ton of money. Indeed, we're gonna carefully rig up a sturdy ladder to climb up our mast safely, spending just about $50 on materials and a bit of elbow grease on sewing. I've got to say, for this project, we're certainly going to need a few tools and some specific skills. At the very least, we should have access to a drill, a metal saw for cutting the steps, and of course sewing supplies, including a sewing machine. In my case, the sewing machine I use is basically the cheapest one I found on Amazon, and it does a great job for simple repairs on the boat. It's totally legit for this mission and set me back about $40. They say the sewing machine from Lidl works great too. Haven't tried it myself. And of course, there are then specific machines for sail making and stuff, so if you've got one, great. And if not, don't sink too much money into your first one, cause it's all about learning. As for the rest of the stuff you'll need, a spool of high quality sewing thread is crucial. Ensure it's made of durable nylon, so it can withstand the sun's intense beating. In my case, I bought a big one like this a while back that I use for all my repairs, and that I've used in this project, only cost me about $10. And it comes with more than 1 kilometer of thread suitable for the sewing machine, a roll of 25mm wide and 50mm long polypropylene webbing, the kind they use for making backpack straps. Y'all can find the links in the video description and on my website. The 50 meters is right for a mast about 12 meters tall like mine, or even taller. It set me back about $15. And finally, round aluminum tubing to make the steps. In my case, I'm gonna make steps that are 13 inches wide with a 15.7 inch gap between steps, so I end up with about 24 steps, which is more or less 26.2 feet of pipe. For tube thickness, I recommend an aluminum tube with at least 20mm diameter. I've tried it with thinner tubing, and it ends up bending, so take it from me, about 20mm in diameter. You can easily snag it at any hardware store. I personally snagged mine at Brick-O-Mar for roughly $25 in total. Well then, let's get this show on the road. The first thing that's going to be necessary is to either cut or carefully fold the tape in half. The breaking strength of the 1-inch tape I've purchased is well over 200 kN. For safety, we're going to double up on it, which will also allow us to precisely slot the steps in between the two belts. And with a double strap on each side of the step, our ladder's breaking weight capacity will exceed 800 kg, so we can use it with absolute peace of mind. But let's get to step 1. We're gonna fold the sling in half and sew both halves together with the sewing machine.
A few moments later. More moments later. Many minutes later.
Once we've joined the two halves, we're gonna fold the tape in half again and with a permanent marker mark the position of each step on both halves. We'll mark the first one, which will be about 24 inches from the fold, and the rest will be spaced about 16 inches apart. To measure and mark accurately, the best thing to do is to bring the two halves of the tape together and mark with a marker on both sides at the same time. Once we've marked the tape, we're gonna go ahead and cut the steps, making cuts of 33 cm, which is a good width for the steps, you know? This size lets us get the most out of the tubing, squeezing out 3 steps from every meter of tube. The next step is to drill a hole at the ends of each step, which will help us later to sew the sling. And that's the easiest part of the process, hands down. Now that we've got all the pieces ready, it's time to put the ladder together. So what we're gonna do is open up the seam at the mark that matches each step. We're going to carefully wedge a step between the two belts in the small gap we've created, and then we'll meticulously stitch the belts back together, first over the top, then under the step to securely lock it in place between the belts. We'll utilize the holes we've made to run some stitches inside the tube, ensuring it can't slide out of them either. My advice is to carefully stitch 3 rows of seams below the step, at least 2 above, and then proceed to do the same thing on the other side of the step at the matching mark on the other half of the tape. Well, this relatively simple task, you just have to do it like 25 times, depending on how tall your mast actually is. So y'all better find something fun to watch on TV while sewing and make the most of those rainy afternoons or lockdown. While I was sewing up the steps, I actually had enough time to watch at least a couple of Netflix movies. It's also absolutely essential that we must sew the top fold of the runner, ensuring it doesn't slip when you step on either side of the steps. And finally, after a whole lot of elbow grease, we've got our scale ready to roll. Alright, once we've successfully finished rolling out the ladder, it's time to climb up. A basic yet essential rule is that we can't just climb up being secured to only one point. We're going to utilize the ladder to ascend, but we absolutely need an additional halyard to securely hook onto for self-belay, whether someone's actively belaying us with the other halyard and the winch, or if we're going to self-belay. To make sure we're securely protected, we can use a bunch of different gadgets, starting with the simplest thing, which would be using a Prusik knot, for instance. Essentially, that's kinda like you can look it up online how to tie a Prusik knot. It's a climbing technique, but the basic idea is that I can slide this knot up with my hand, but if I hang from it, it tightens up right away. Okay? And the other technique, a bit more advanced and also safer, though this one's definitely the most cost effective, is to utilize a climbing auto block. What I'm gonna do next is to securely strap on the harness. When I bought it, it was a bit skinnier, don't y'all worry, but it still fits. Alright, once we've got the harness on, whether it's with the Prusik knot or the self-locking device, what we'll do is hook the self-locking device to the harness to make it more comfortable to work with. I also rub it on my neck. And basically what you do is you hook it onto the cable, and then when I go up it runs free, and if I fall, it catches me. This is super important, always firmly anchored to two distinctly different places. It'd be pretty much exactly the same deal with the knot. As you ascend, you can freely navigate carefully around with your hand, and should you unexpectedly fall, indeed, we're securely reattached. Honestly, the climbing rig is awesome. Thanks to it, you can even go up solo with your hands around the mast, making sure you're secure with a climbing ascender. You can effortlessly shimmy up to the very top of the mast quickly and quite easily. Honestly, I don't see any issue whatsoever with utilizing it to go solo on your adventures. Obviously, if you've got backup support, things are considerably safer, and you won't encounter any sort of trouble whatsoever. It'll be a whole lot smoother. Plus, you won't have to make the person diligently hauling you up with the winch exert themselves excessively and bust their hump. It's super important that when you're hanging onto it, you're also securely attached to the mast, because the only risk is the ladder coming away from the mast. So it's important that when you put it together, you give it a lot of tension from the get-go, okay? You gotta anchor it at the bottom and you gotta tie it tight to the top of the mast, give it some tension, and that way, even if you're on it, it'll stay close to the mast. There's also the intriguing option of meticulously rigging up some mast skates on every few steps, akin to the ones from the main sail. There are commercial ladders that work like that, and those are set in stone, but it's a real pain to roll them out that way because you have to go through the hassle of hoisting the mainsail, sliding the skates onto the mast, and raising it. So, if y'all are using climbing gear and happen to have a rope blocker, you're not going to have any trouble at all going up solo or helping someone else out, and you're going to do it all safe and sound. As for its construction, honestly, when I first thought of the project, I initially saw it as more doable. Now looking back, it doesn't seem so pricey, but I've definitely binged at least a couple of Netflix movies while diligently sewing, and it's work. No one's taking those 5 hours of meticulous stitching away from us, so if you've got the cash, you might also consider purchasing a commercial one, but honestly, the outcome is solid, it's easy to do, not too tricky, and you're gonna absolutely nail it. I'm super happy with the work I've accomplished. I'm absolutely sure I'm gonna get a lot of use out of it, and I'm confident if y'all get one, whether you make it or purchase it, it's gonna be incredibly handy. Thanks a bunch for tuning in, folks. Hope y'all enjoyed today's video, and don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Y'all can find all the links in the video description right down below.